citizens. People will just simply drive in, work in Rhode Island, and drive out and take their disposable income. And when they buy property, the property tax payments, which communities desperately need, will be paid to in Massachusetts and not in Newport or Middletown or Cranston or Kingston. But most importantly, we're going to lose an entire generation of young people who deserve the right and the opportunity through education and training to be able to have sustainable life in a work environment that's compatible to their training and to the market that we have. So the absolute investment of public education, and public education is not only elementary and secondary, but also public higher education. And then the continuum of life investment of adult literacy and education and training. It's a lifelong learning. It's a continuum from birth to death. We have to come up with a strategic investment strategy and policy anchored on public education training. And I would also suggest, and as I go into our really gazelle or competitive industries, we absolutely have to have core competencies in math and science. It's absolutely essential. And then the final piece, the challenge, which is related to education, is workforce training. We absolutely have to invest in our workers. Now the good news with that is that 2 weeks ago, the governor, the Senate president, the House Majority Leader, or Speaker of the House all together announced with what I think is one of the most simplest but strategic investments in workforce training. We announced a whole community college Rhode Island skills training program that will develop a career pathways program where we will be able to have private sector business design training curriculum, and then that curriculum will be used as a platform for training and workforce education through the community college of Rhode Island. Why CCRI? Because that's where we are. 99.9% of the students who are there are us, or our family members, or our children, or our associates. So the community college will become the platform going forward of a well-oriented, strategic, private sector design workforce training collaborative. I can't tell you how important that is. So those are the challenges. What are the opportunities? Well, despite the recession, despite some of the challenges of lack of consistency in public policy and business planning and tax policy within the state, we've got a number of key industry clusters and companies within those clusters that are growing, will continue to grow, and will drive the Rhode Island economy for many years to come. And each and every one of these sectors are centered in New England generally, but we have an opportunity to continue to have them grow with targeted policies within the Rhode Island marketplace. The first that I'd like to talk to is our higher education institutions. One of the things that's a hallmark of New England, unlike anywhere else in the world, is we have some of the finest public-private higher education and research institutions in the world. See, we take for granted because we live and work in New England, but for everyone else, the clusters of higher education institutions, there are a few good ones in Boston, and there are a few okay ones in Connecticut. But let's talk about what we have right here. The cluster that we have in our capital city, Rhode Island School of Design, Brown University, Johnson & Wales, University of Rhode Island, Community College Rhode Island, Providence College. And then you start to branch out into Bryant University in the northern part of the state, and they're aligned to a cluster that I'll talk about in a few minutes. And down here, Sarah Regina University, the United States War College. All of these institutions, and many of them are center of excellence in their own right, that are clustered here within Rhode Island. Did I miss one? Help me, someone. Roger Williams University, and I'm on the advisory board there. You are right. Thank you. Any more? Rhode Island College. Come on, keep coming. Any more? That's an awful lot of higher education institutions, right? In one small state. And we're not Texas and California. Think of that. So we have this cluster of institutions that are not only preparing future leaders, and we need to do more and better and get more Rhode Islanders into these institutions, but they also are setting a stage that as large institutions and corporations in their own right, they are significant supply chain suppliers. Combined, you're talking well over $1 billion of annual contracting vendor service supplies in running and operating these institutions. Very few people look at a Brown or a URI within their communities as an economic asset, or a Sarah Regina University or a War College right here as an economic asset. They employ tens of thousands of people, largely in high-skill, high-wage positions. They put out tens and millions of supply vendor contracts and services, and now they have become active players in drawing to Rhode Island National Institute of Science and other national research grants, which are now spinning off laboratories, research centers, training centers that are all being clustered around these institutions. So the higher education industry sector is successful here, it's growing here, and with the continuous support and investment, we'll continue to grow those institutions within this state. Aligned very closely with higher education is life sciences. And again, we have some of the finest hospitals, research centers, and medical care centers in the world clustered here in the New England marketplace. And these institutions are growing. They are spinning off medical centers, research centers, laboratories, private sector investors who would like to co-locate and have access to research and training programs within the hospitals. Several days ago, Governor Carcieri joined the President Ruth Simmons of Brown and many other dignitaries to announce the building of a brand new, underwritten by the Alpert family, medical school and center for Brown University, a $100 million investment project. And not on the east side adjacent to Brown, but in the old jewelry district on Chestnut Street, as a part of our strategy to create and transform that jewelry district into a knowledge-based district and really create a critical mass of life science and knowledge-based industries. There are several companies, one the EDC has already worked with, that has strategically relocated right across the street from that soon-to-be completed medical center. And what that medical center and school will bring, it'll bring medical device equipment, research companies, lab space, medical centers will all start to cluster around that environment. In fact, as someone who worked 20 years ago in South Providence, when it was a great challenge in that community to bring in investment, there was a policy and strategy at that time to support the building of Women and Infants Hospital, to support the building of Hasbro, and then strategically to begin to come up with a redevelopment plan, because we know that once those institutions were built, they would create a cluster of medical centers and research centers and laboratories and the Ronald McDonald House. And now a large part of that upper South Providence area down to Allens Avenue is an incredibly robust cluster of life science and related medical facilities. So the good news is higher education, life sciences will grow. But let me give you a stark contrast of how we'll fail if we don't connect public education workforce training to significant investment in competitive industry sectors. We will transform the jewelry district into a life science and a knowledge-based economy cluster. It's happening anyway. It's happening now. But here's a stark concern that I have. Right across the Point Street Bridge, just a stone's throw away, is Upper South Providence, one of the poorest communities in the state of Rhode Island. In fact, some of our most challenged public schools, from elementary to high school, are all clustered in that area. Without a targeted and strategic investment in public education workforce training, how many of the kids that are currently residing and going to school just a few blocks away will be able to obtain those quality jobs right within the reach in the adjacent community? So think about this. And I'm not saying that every child should be a physicist or a medical doctor. I'm not. But I do suggest that there are opportunities for these children, for that community, to be lab technicians, physician's assistants. I can go through the list. And these jobs are good jobs, and they don't require PhDs and master's degrees. In many cases, they require certificates of training from a community college or a bachelor's degree. So I'm not here to say that we're trying to overreach within a community. I'm simply saying if we simply connect the public education investment dots with the growth communities and the businesses within those communities that, for the most part, being not Texas or California, we're all adjacent to each other, it's achievable. But if we don't connect those dots, I can guarantee you that 10 years from now, very few of the children who happen to live, or unfortunately happen to live, in Upper South Providence will not be able to achieve the jobs that we're creating with public dollars and public investment for the people of Rhode Island. And I'll guarantee you what will happen, because it's happening today. Children in other communities who value education and workforce training, they will be prepared, and they'll just take that awful long drive from Boston to Providence, which takes a whole hour, for a good job. And we'll even make it easier for them, because we're going to continue to invest in public transportation and transit through MBTA and systems. We'll make it even easier for New England marketplace employees to come and work in Rhode Island, and at the end of the day leave and take their disposable incomes back to their other communities. So the opportunities are there, but we have to connect the dots. Now, what are the other great opportunities? Right here in this community, John Randall talked about that. The United States Navy presence here, which has been present since colonial times, is growing, and growing at a trajectory that's going to completely change how Navy operations and their presence, both physically and as an investment strategy, that we've come to see. In fact, growing up in Newport in the early 70s, being a kid, I remember when the Atlantic Fleet